Good evening, folks. We'll call the meeting to order. This meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. There's no additions or deletions to the agenda unless someone on council has something they'd like to bring forward. Okay, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. March 4th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda. There's a recommendation that Committee of the Whole approve the agenda for March 4th, 2025 meeting as presented. Someone ready to move that? Okay, moved by Councillor Fullerton, seconded by Councillor Daphne. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Approval of the February 12th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Recommendation that Committee of the Whole approve the minutes from the February 12th, 2025 meeting as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Strong. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. There's no presentations, no business arising from the minutes. So under new business, the first item on the agenda is 8.1. The Committee of the Whole, well, there's a recommendation, but first we're going to hear from Ellen Johnson, our Regional Accessibility Coordinator. Sir, Ellen, you're up.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So I would have met most of you a few, I don't know, was it months ago now when we did our orientation for accessibility. So I would have told you then about, just an update or a reminder about the Accessibility Act, which is the provincial legislation that kind of tells us what we have to do for accessibility as municipalities. So that was from 2017. And one of the requirements of that legislation is that we have an accessibility plan. And this region, so all of Lunenburg County, created an accessibility plan back in 2021. And now the next update to that plan is due, which is, the next obligation under the Act. So over the past, 6-8 months, we've been kind of working to update the information in the plan to produce this updated version of the regional accessibility plan. So we've done a bunch of we did a survey back in December, and we've done several in-person public engagement sessions around the county. And we've had lots of people talk about like what the barriers are and what the challenges are. And what we found was a lot of the barriers that existed back in 2021 are still in place. Obviously a lot of them are big things like, sidewalks and transportation and attitudes of people. None of these things are things that change quickly. And so these are all still kind of issues that people are dealing with. So we've continued to keep those in the draft of the accessibility plan for 2025. And this plan will go from 2025 to the end of March 2028, when there will be a new plan that will be required under the Act. So what I'm hoping from you this evening is just direction that the actions that I have put in, that I've presented to you in the agenda package, that are the regional actions, are things that you as a council are comfortable with. They are things that we've kind of talked about at a staff level and feel are quite reasonable to do as collaborative or regional actions. And I'll explain a bit further. So when I was able to get everything together to give to you for last week for tonight, there's been a change since then based on feedback I've gotten from other municipal units and also from members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So their recommendation was to keep all of the regional actions in this regional plan and to take out the individual actions that we had originally thought to include in that plan as well, and have each municipality provide their individual actions separately, but also to make those public. So that gives us a little bit more time to kind of focus on what those individual municipal actions will be, so specific to town of Lunenburg. And you have those in your package, the ones that we're suggesting, but it'll give a bit more time for us to kind of narrow those down and make sure they are what you all want them to be. But right now, I'm really hoping to get any feedback on the regional actions that were included. There are 17 of them, and they are also, several of them kind of actions that appear in this plan and that will likely also appear in the anti-racism and diversity plan because they're focused on kind of equity more broadly. So it's kind of a way of kind of sharing resources for those two topics. So I wasn't going to read through all 17 of them, but you all have them there. Do you have any questions or concerns about any of them?
Deputy Mayor?
Through the chair. Just a question with regard to number 5, and it's really just a clarification question. It's with respect to REMO,
Yeah.
and it says that REMO is to use plain language. So I'm wondering if you can explain that to me. And I'm wondering, I suspect it may have something to do with acronyms and
Yeah.
from my own personal experience, it's like a language of its own. So is that what's being referenced?
Yes, that is what's being referenced. So in the plan, when you see the full draft, you'll see that there are some there's a glossary of terms, and it does say what plain language means in the glossary of terms. And it really does mean just speaking in a way and communicating in a way that can be understood the first time. You can, you can read it, you can understand it, and you can act on whatever it's asking you to do the first time without having to figure it out, right? So that's the way the plan is written in plain language as much as possible. And this is the recommendation that, when people need to learn something or when they're stressed, having things very clearly communicated is really important. So that would be the recommendation for that action. Yeah.
Any other questions? On the floor, any other questions from the table here? No other questions. I'd just like to make a comment. I was very impressed with the 18 action items you had listed for Lunenburg. And I guess my question would be more, I know we're not suggesting or voting on those tonight, but when we talk about them in a little further detail, would you come back to a meeting in the future if we wanted you to discuss those?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And those really did come from, my experience working with Lunenburg and from staff. And so they are very much from the ground up for those.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed because it was they related very well to everything we do here. In fact, all my notes that I had made basically refer to those, so I'm good on the others.
Great.
If there's no other questions or concerns, we have a recommendation in front of us. Is someone prepared to move that recommendation? Yes, please.
I recommend that the Committee of the Whole direct staff to incorporate the proposed regional and town of Lunenburg actions into the draft Lunenburg County Accessibility Plan 2025-2028 and return the final plan to council for consideration and approval at the March 25th, 2025 meeting.
Moved by Councillor Strong. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Daphne. Any other questions? Motion? Deputy Mayor.
Do we want to amend that to speak to Ellen's suggestion that the specific town of Lunenburg items be discussed separate?
Yeah, so for tonight in that motion, we're just passing the regional plan and we'll discuss the individual town plan at a later date. Okay, can we change that in the motion somehow?
How's this for plain language? The recommendation is that the Committee of the Whole direct staff to incorporate the proposed regional and actions into the draft Lunenburg County Accessibility Plan 2025-2028 and return the final plan to council for consideration and approval at the March 25th, 2025 meeting. And direct staff, this is to the town of Lunenburg actions.
Just based on Ellen's feedback and that this will be coming back. So the opportunity to further flush out those town of Lunenburg actions will likely come back to a future committee of the whole in the same kind of process.
So just with the first part, forget the second part.
Okay, it's been moved. Is seconder good with that? Seconded by Councillor Daphne. Other further questions or concerns? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. Now 8.2, draft anti-racism and diversity plan. We have Jem Roberts here tonight, Regional Anti-Racism and Diversity Coordinator. Jem, you're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. So similarly to Ellen, I'm her counterpart in supporting this work regionally. So similar to that act, for my work, there was the Dismantling Racism and Hate Act, which was put out in 2022 that called for all municipalities to have an action plan centered around that work, which then developed an intermunicipal agreement. So same situation. And I've been doing this work unofficially before, but officially contractually from November up until this date. So what you see right now is a draft plan based on some rigorous community engagement to inform as much as we can until we have ability to do more community engagement with very precise questions, internal engagement to understand from staff what are the experiences, and then this is basically a plan to some extent, but also on best practices that we've heard either from provincial bodies or from persons who have been working in this area for a while, things that have come up continuously. So as you'll see on the last 2 pages, there is a list of specific action items. Those are solely recommended items to review. Right now, we're in the process of forming my regional committee. So this is the first formation. The first approval and review will be tomorrow with mayors and wardens. And then sometime in March, you'll get those recommendations. So what we're putting forward is approval of the draft action plan as it stands right now in terms of content, in terms of approach. And once the committee is formed, we want to prioritize First Voice for their review. And then the final plan will come towards you for the final action items approval.
Thank you. There's a recommendation in front of us, but before we go to the recommendation, does anyone have any questions for Jem? Comments? Councilor Babineau?
Just a comment, really. I'm just happy to see this moving forward. I am the Lunenburg appointee to the committee. So I'm excited that I'm going to get to work with you guys in the future, and yeah, just happy to see this coming to us now and to work on it in the future.
Thank you. My only comment is when I saw the budget breakdown, I was very impressed that 71% of the budget's being spent on either public engagement, relationship building, or training and education. So I think that's the most important aspect of making this successful. And I think that, public engagement is so important with everything. So thank you very much for, the budget looked really well done. So thank you.
I will provide the caveat that the budget will be for review for council and approval. So I'll just say that the numbers might shift a little bit, but it does tell the story of this is where the focus is. We are prioritizing First Voice. And when we had conversations at the provincial level, that is one thing that they said that they haven't seen very often, and having transparency in this work is essential for us to move forward. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you. So there's a recommendation. Is someone prepared to move that recommendation? Councillor Fullerton?
Yes, I will. I would put forward that the Committee of the Whole refer the draft anti-racism and diversity plan to Council for consideration and approval at the March 25th, 2025 meeting.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Babineau. Any further discussion or question on the motion? All those raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much. You can go home if you'd like. You don't have to stay, right? Okay, so 8.3 on the agenda is the Heritage Impact Inquiry on the Buffer Zone, letter from ICOMOS Canada. referred here in the middle of January meeting. There's a request for direction. There's a recommendation basically in front of us, but it's up for discussion at this point. So who wants to comment? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, through the chair. Uh, Looking at staff who would be be called upon to respond to this, I think it would be helpful to have these questions answered or addressed as a way of better informing council and the public. So is there any issue with that from staff's point of view, or is there anything you could add or any commentary you'd want to provide on that, Mr. Kiley? Thanks.
Certainly. Through the chair, no, I don't see any issue with responding to this. I think it's fairly straightforward. It's questions that I believe staff have answered before in other contexts, so should be fairly simple to put together and formulate a response.
Thank you, Mark. So do we need a motion to direct staff to respond to the 5 questions in front of us to ICOMOS, or don't need a motion? Okay. No motion.
So direct.
Pardon?
We're so direct.
You're so directed. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we'll move on to 8.4. There's a couple letters there from both the Lunenburg Academy Foundation and Social Public Libraries requesting a washroom facility at the Lunenburg Academy grounds. So there is a memo in there, or letters, I should say. So does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns based on that?
I just wanted to note that we have some people in the jury room here. If you have any questions, I think they might be able to make it a more robust hearing tonight, or thing tonight, whatever.
Bruce, would you like to? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. Yeah, I wanted to speak to what we consider to be an issue with the limited washroom facilities at the academy, particularly on the first floor, which is the public space. As you probably know, the first floor houses the library, the Heritage Classroom, the Atlantic Canada Language Academy, and Lunenburg Walking Tours. And there are currently only 2 single-unit washrooms on the first floor, which are both located in the library. So in peak season, we can see anywhere between 240 and 475 people a day access that first floor. And that puts a real burden on the 2 washrooms that are currently there. And that number would be tough to deal with in any case, but what exacerbates that is they show up in bus tours at 40 or 50 people at a time who get off the bus, and first thing they want to do is go to the washroom. So we end up with lineups and congestion in the halls and so on. And the 2 washrooms end up being not only untidy, but to some extent unsanitary. And the library staff is left with the burden of cleaning those. And there have been occasions when the mess has been enough that they weren't able to clean them and required the services of a plumber. So, it's inconvenience for everybody, the tenants, the visitors. It kind of leaves a bad taste in visitors' mouths, I'm sure. They don't have the proper facilities to accommodate them. So we wanted to ask the council to consider installing some kind of temporary washroom facilities. We're not thinking porta potties. I don't think that would be in keeping with the majesty of the building, nor are we looking for a solution like down on Blue Nose Drive, which is very expensive and permanent solution. Something more temporary and much more modest. I don't know exactly what that would look like. We'd like to work with town to come up with a solution if that's in the cards. One thing that keeps coming in my head is, I think, on a golf course, if you go to the 9th hole, which is way away from the clubhouse, you'll find a small building, modest building with a couple of composting toilets. That might be entirely acceptable for this kind of solution. But as I said, I'd like to work with the town to come up with something that's more reasonable if the town can find the funds to work with us. So
Thank you. Any questions for Bruce? Yes, you're looking for something simple, like you see at every golf course, multiple locations on an 18-hole golf course, for example. There's 2 toilets or so and a sink and nothing fancy.
that's exactly what I was picturing, something along those lines.
So we are hitting into the budget process. So would it make sense to have our staff talk to you, come back with some possible numbers so we at least have some idea what we're talking about? Because right now we have no numbers, no idea what we're really thinking. So until we know
Right.
what that is, I'm sure the answer won't be no, but it won't be yes. So it's like, I'm thinking we need more definite, what we're actually going to possibly look at putting there.
Sure.
And it might even be something that it's if not this year, next, but at least we know a number. Without a number, we know nothing, right?
Right.
So would you be okay to work with staff through the budget process?
Absolutely. Yes.
Is council okay with that at this time? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 8.5 is traffic and parking study follow-up. So basically, this is our chance to discuss what we saw in that report. So we all have the report. We've had it for a while now. So who around the table would like to discuss the report or start? Anybody? Councillor Vapina?
Through the chair. So without going into my feelings on the report, there are a few things that came out of that in terms of recommendations that I'd be interested in seeing us pursue. Number one would be the community center parking lot and the reconfiguration of that. I think that could be pretty important to gain 40 spots for not too much time and effort and money. And then, sorry, there's a glare on my screen. There we go. I think maybe exploring some of the suggestions around like metered parking, like pay for plate and stuff like that, even just to get our staff to sort of review and come forth with some numbers. I think that one could be useful. And then also the more consistent signage for streets, and particularly on the one-way street network. That is something that came up a little bit when I was campaigning, like on the doorsteps. So I think that one could be valuable.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Daphne?
Through the chair, I think we need to look at the speed limit in town. I'm not sure what that would look like. Reducing it to 30 downtown. I have no idea where we'd go with that, but I think definitely the speed for sure we need to look at.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Fullerton?
Yeah. And I think further to that, sorry, through the chair, I think further to that, there are certain streets, particularly those coming in from highways into the town, where, we want people to understand right off the bat that they're in the town and they need to slow down.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Greek?
I think something else that should be potentially reviewed is the point in the recommendation regarding creating a resident parking pass for those with vehicles that live on streets without driveways. I certainly don't think that, an all-out parking pass at a low cost to park anywhere is necessarily the answer, but I do think that we could better support those that don't have provided parking with their housing or their business location.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Strong?
In light of something else that we heard about today, I think there was some discussion in the report, and I can't put my finger on it right this moment, but about able parking spots and being more clearly aligned with able ability to access the town. Seems to be a priority in the next 3 years.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have a few comments. I agree with basically everything that everybody has said. I think the consistent signage for streets, particularly one way, we can probably do that hopefully at a, minimal cost, and it'll improve. I like the fact that we do a great job, like, painting our parking spots and painting everything, but for whatever reason, because of our weather, I'd say it doesn't last like it used to. So by the time we redo it, there's nothing there, right? So maybe freshening that up a bit more, because I think we have our own gear to do that, if I'm not mistaken, right? So I do like that. I actually, the parking, the parking pass thing, I have two thoughts on that. I do think in some of the residential zoned areas or more residential areas, I think that we could look at something if there's an apartment, say in certain areas of some type of a pass. But the main concern I have in the downtown core is the fact that if you start handing out parking passes to people that work in the downtown core, there'll be no parking for the customers that want to go downtown. And in all fairness, I'm an abuser like everybody else, but you can usually find a parking spot a block and a half up the street, which isn't that far. So we are just locals, myself included, are quite spoiled when it comes into the town of Lunenburg. So you go anywhere else in the world. I mean, I always use the Costco example. You go to Costco, park from here to the academy away from the building. You'll walk it in, you'll do about 6 laps in Costco. Then you'll drive, you walk back to your car, and you're all good. But if you come in town and want to get the mail, if you can't park right in front of the post office, you lose your mind, right? So it's just a mentality thing with a lot of locals. But I do think it's something we could look at, but I'm not in favor of the recommendation that they have in there of like a very minimal free for all pass that you can park anywhere. I think for $30 was the recommendation a year. And the speeding thing, I really think that what it's been proven to us, there's a lot of people in town that feel there's a lot of speeding happening. The problem is it's not. The RCMP has told us there hasn't been. This study has told us there hasn't been. So what we now have to do is, if 50 is what they're going, and that's not a crime, then we have to lower the speed limit. And we now have the ability, which we didn't have a number of years ago. You'll go in many communities now, especially in like urbanized, like housing areas, they have it down to 30. So maybe that's something we can work with Tyson and the RCMP and look at maybe changing certain areas in town to a 30 zone. I really think that would help. But I think that the problem is we've heard enough now from both the RCMP and these folks that people just aren't flying in 10. People just feel 55, for example, is too fast. So it's our job to look at maybe coming up. I mean, you might not want to go to 30 in some of those areas, maybe even dropping it to 40. I honestly don't know what our options are, but I think working with the traffic authority, with the RCMP and coming up with some solutions might be a way to go, but we definitely have to look at that. So besides that, I won't comment too much more on the rest of this study. So Deputy Mayor.
I think, I'm not sure, Kayla, if there was a motion previously on speed limits in town, when the RCMP presented to us, we had brought it up at that point in time but I don't know if that ever got captured. But if not, then I think we do need to make a motion to have that researched more fully. There's lots of data in here. I'm not sure if any of it's going to be helpful in determining which roads and, the speed limit is appropriately lowered, or how we determine that, and what the parameters are the province puts on those things. So I'm not sure how we proceed, but if it's by motion of some sort thanks.
Yeah, so I was going to suggest as well, we've been listing off a couple of things, and some of them, if they were to move forward in the next little bit, have direct budget implications. So if we're looking at the reconsideration of the community center parking lot, paid parking options, I forget the plate 5, different, something other than coin. More consistent signage for streets, recognizing that would have a cost, able parking spot considerations, that would have a cost. So I would suggest if council would like to see that move forward for consideration in the upcoming budget, then that would be a motion in itself to bring these specific requests forward for budget deliberations so they can be explored for this year. Not budget required would be looking at speed limits, as we had just said. So that could be another motion to bring back a report of what that would look like. Same with the resident parking passes for the downtown core or in paid parking areas. So a couple of different options there. Some I think are directly tied to budget deliberations up front. Some are more exploratory reports.
Okay, so anybody want to start making some motions? Really, that's what we have to start doing. So we can start with the speed limit one. That's a pretty simple motions. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move forward on that?
I would move that staff explore costs. No, not for that. That staff look into what is required to institute speed limits below the 50 km/h limit within the town of Lunenburg and provide a report as to what would be recommended we proceed with regard to limiting speeds within the town.
Okay, that's removed. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Strong. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion carried unanimous. Next would be a little more complicated motion if we want to pick out the things from this that we would at least like some numbers on, because really to discuss any of the things that relate to budgetary requirements, we would really need staff to come back at budget time with some numbers. There are some numbers in the report, but we'd have to have those included. So is someone prepared to make a motion on some of the few things that we've cherry picked from the report?
I have a question through the chair. When is the budget, like how much time are we giving staff to do this?
Budget meetings are scheduled to start in mid-April, I think. Most of the numbers are in this report somewhere, so it should be fine. Just that staff would then have to come back with ways of paying for it, right, as well. So I think that, there might be funding out there, who knows, but until we actually make a motion to direct them to look into it, they'll just sit here on this paper on a shelf somewheres, like the last parking study.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if you did want, again, the will of council or committee as a whole is if you felt comfortable putting forward that you would like to direct staff to consider for the upcoming 25-26 budget deliberations, the reconfiguration of the community center parking lot, paid parking options, consistent signage, and able parking spots. You could put that all together. That was number one. If the consensus of council based on this proposed motion with those 4 items didn't jive with everybody, you could break it out into 4 different motions. And recognizing if it were to be put into the budget based on tonight's direction, that would be another consideration during the deliberation. So council would have the opportunity to discuss that and potentially move it. Perhaps something gets identified and it's very expensive and council wants to direct that for a future year or something like that.
Someone prepared to make a motion including all 4 of those items? Councillor Strong made that motion.
Through the chair, I am going to recommend that we provide direction to staff to provide, in anticipation of upcoming budget deliberations, the costs involved of reconfiguration of the community center parking lot, able parking and accessibility issues associated with that able parking, paid parking, and consistent signage. Did I get them?
Been moved. Is there a seconder? Okay, it's been seconded by Councillor Fullerton or Babineau. Question, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. The only one I have issue with is the paid parking. The meter, the changing of the metering technology. It's a big one. It's been looked at in the past. And it requires quite a bit of infrastructure change out and a lot of determining of where best they would be figured. And I just think it's a big ask of staff to have that in place. I know there's, well, I was trying to see if there's much by way of numbers in here, but I don't think it's very specific as to where they would suggest they be located and that sort of thing. So I think that's something we could look at, but I'm thinking that one could wait, whereas the others I think might be easier to find numbers for and potentially implement in the upcoming fiscal year.
Anyone else? I guess my comment on those pay by plate system is there not like a happy medium? Like we now have meters that are as old as me, and then you can go with state of the art that you need tap or whatever else. Can we just flip can we somehow turn the old ones and have something that just takes you can put your bank card or credit card up against it? Do we have to go with those walls and know your card number and tap? I mean, it seems to be going from one extreme to another. Is there not a happy medium out there that people don't actually have to have change in their, even if it took bills? Like, is that an option? I guess I'll ask. Do you have any idea, Tyson?
Through the chair, I'm not gonna pretend that I'm an expert in different metering systems, so that would take a little bit of research from staff to see if there's a more moderate solution.
Thank you. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think finance or some staff might have some information already on the pay as you go, or whatever it's called, pay by plate system, and where they might go, because we actually made a motion and it passed and gave staff direction a little after the budget last year, so May of last year or June of last year, to look into and be prepared for this year's budget, because we knew it couldn't be ready for last year's, with options. So staff was actually directed 10 months ago. So I would think they'd have some information either close to being ready or so I think a lot of the work you were talking about, Deputy Mayor, is probably started or done. I could be mistaken, but I know there was definitely a motion made and passed by the previous council. So we have a motion on the floor at this point. Do we want to leave that in at this point? But if they haven't done any of that work and it's too much, they can come back to us and tell us, but leave it in for now. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried unanimous. So that's all we need for that item, is it not, Kayla, for now? Okay. So we'll move on to 8.6, REMO budget and strategic planning resource allocation. So there's a report in your package, and most of you had the pleasure of joining a regional REMO meeting 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, on a Wednesday night. And you have the report in front of you. As you can see, there's a little bit of a discussion on both options. Just to let you know, those that don't know, option one is one that we already approved, quite frankly, last year. Option one was one they were supposed to do last year. Some, staffing or whatever, it didn't seem to work out, but they felt last year option one would be sufficient to try, at least at that point. Now some want to try option one and some want to try option two. So it's really our choice to decide which way we want to go. There is a recommendation in there for council to make if you so wish. There's two differences: double the cost, option two is, but option two would probably or supposedly give us better REMO service. So it's really up to our council what we want to recommend to go back to REMAC with next Wednesday and decide at that point. In saying that, REMAC is a regional committee, so we could vote one way and the committee could vote another when it's all said and done, right? But we're one of 5 voices, so but they just want clear direction from each council. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say about it at this point or comment, now's the time. And we do need an actual recommendation that the deputy mayor and I can go back with and speak on your behalf. So, Councillor Babineau.
So just thinking back to that REMO budget meeting, which is the only REMO meeting I've attended, I keep thinking about something that the chair said, which was that option 1, while the one that was voted on last time was never actually able to be explored in terms of service level because of the staffing issues, and that they weren't able to have a second coordinator located in Chester. So I would personally like to see us go with option 1, just because we didn't actually really do that properly last time. So it's hard to say whether or not that service level was sufficient or not.
Deputy Mayor.
Just following up on what she said, Councillor Babineau, I think in the report, it actually spells out an alternative option, kind of, or hybrid too, in that it says rather than selecting one option over the other, REMAC could adopt a staged approach whereby a coordinator is hired regionally and embedded in Chester in 2 years, an assessment of progress, or even in 1 year, and it's an assessment of progress on local pre-planning training of municipal staff for ECC work, and addressing after action report recommendations could be completed so that the REMAC could determine if the addition of 2 more local coordinators is then advisable. To the point that was made, we haven't tested that, and I fully understand and appreciate what the representatives from Chester were saying in advocating for more comprehensive professional staff with regard to emergencies. It is vitally important, and it shouldn't be handled just on the side of someone's desk. And but I think we as a region have done extremely well with our REMO, and we had a very strong recommendation and a path forward with adding to that professional staff. But I think an incremental change and improvement to the organization is most advisable.
So do you want to make that recommendation or motion? Anyone else want to comment on it? I just want to say that REMO, for what we pay, is well worth our money. So whichever way we end up going in the end, or whichever way REMAC decides to go in the end, we still get good bang for our buck, because we could not provide regional emergency, measures for 20,000 or 40,000 on our own. So just, keep that. We're not talking a lot of money, and we're talking about working professionally and for the betterment of our residents with our neighbors. So, we can decide something here tonight, but I think as a group, we'll go there realizing that whatever REMAC, decides in the end, we'll be part of the team and we'll support, I think so.
I think that's a very fair comment, and a point that's worth making is that it is money well spent, and we would not be doing as well on our own, or it would be, much more expensive for us to get the same value of service that that we are getting in this regional organization, although it is always challenging to coordinate all the effort. So I would make the motion that it would be our first choice that I would, and is this a recommendation? I'm looking at Kayla. Is this as we're just committee of the whole, how is that a direction that council, that this group give to the mayor and I as representatives? Is that how we would do it?
Yeah.
And make the motion Tuesday night.
So the intent of this was committee of the whole for discussion tonight in order to put this recommendation forward at the next REMAC advisory committee meeting, it will have to come back to council. So anything right here is just committee of the whole has discussed it. This was the direction from committee of the whole. It goes to REMAC and then it comes back to council for final approval. And that will be the same for every partner in the REMO. So after this REMAC committee meeting on the 12th, I believe it is, every 5 partner municipality will have to take those back and approve them. And that's how we'll end up with the budget. And
But after tonight, whatever we decide here gives Deputy Mayor and I go and need to go and present what we decide tonight. Right?
exactly.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, do we need a motion of this group to give direction to the mayor and I, or to give, or for it to come to the March 11th meeting to be taken to the March 12th meeting?
For clarity, I love a good motion. So I think just motion makes it clear for
Committee
everybody.
of the whole can only make recommendations. They can't make motions. So you can make a recommendation.
Okay, so do you want to make a recommendation? Deputy Mayor?
Would make a recommendation that the to council that the town of Lunenburg offer our support for option 1 for the coming year, with the expectation that it is a staged approach that can be further assessed in future years.
It's been a recommendation. That's all we do at this point. We need a seconder. So
Again,
what's-
for this direction, it's not a binding motion per se. Again, we're at committee of the whole, so you're just directing staff to let REMAC know these were
Yep.
the recommendation, and it's going to come back for approval. So seconder, and then we'll vote on
Does
it.
anyone second it? Second by Councillor Fullerton. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimous. Okay, so that's the first thing on here. So then the B is budget approval process. So the way it works now, 2 councils has to approve the REMO budget if they represent 51% of the numbers. And they're recommending that it changes to 3, which would make sense for us. So is there someone prepared to move the recommendation that is in front of you? Option 2 is the one we'd like to go with, I would say. It's moved by Councillor Fulton. You want to read it off there?
That committee of the whole direct staff to present option 2 revised approval process as the town of Lunenburg's preferred choice to the REMO advisory committee.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greek. Any discussion on that option? Deputy Mayor.
I just want to make the point that I think it is important that this happened, and I think it really was. It's almost a housekeeping issue. It should have been done when we joined REBO a few years back. So I think that will go through.
Yeah, I think they all realized that when we joined in 2017, I think it was never changed. So it used to be 51% because it was 4 units. So this makes it more fair. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. There's no notice of motions. Oh, there's a third thing on. No, there isn't. There's nothing else on here. So no notice of motions, no closed session. So a motion for adjournment would be in order. So move, Councillor Fullerton. Thank you very much, folks, for coming tonight.